Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are happy to have you. I see a couple of faces that I haven't seen in a while or don't usually see, so I'm glad to see you all here. Um, yeah, hope to hope to uh, uh, have a good class tonight. So let's get started. I always start with placing the link in the chat there. So if you'd like to catch up on anything or review something, I believe all of our videos are there. So you could feel free to check out there. Again, that's at portlandcole.org. I believe we're also on YouTube if you want to check out there. Okay, so, all right. We are standing right now in the middle of chapter 9 of the book of Kohelet, chapter 9 of the book of Ecclesiastes. And we've been talking about, again, the big general discussion has been what it means to access wisdom, what are the signs of wise people, and what exactly how does wisdom present itself to people. So we've been discussing a very interesting series of verses over here, beginning and middle of chapter 9, discussing the way that the wise person relates to the concept of death, and that death is, instead of being something that tears the person down and says, you know, what's the purpose of it all? Instead, for a wise person, the wise person takes the concept of death and says, wow, that motivates me, right? That allows the person to be more motivated and to get the most out of life. And so we saw a number of different things about this. We saw that, for example, somebody who comes with a attitude of wisdom towards the question of death doesn't say, you know, well, if we're all ending up in the same place, why should I bother doing anything with my life? On the contrary, wisdom says, wow, I have perhaps a limited amount of time in this world. I want to make the most out of that. And what that we've been seeing is that actually creates satisfaction. Okay, we saw last week that King Solomon says to the wise person that you should go and eat your bread with happiness. Okay, you should drink your wine with a good heart. You should wear nice clothing and make sure that you're smelling fresh. That's what we saw in the last two verses, because this is somebody who is going to get the most experience out of life, as opposed to being taken, you know, kind of torn down by this reality. Instead, the person who comes with wisdom is going to say, "Wow, I'm motivated to get the most out of life right now." We also saw last week that he mentions three motivators. There's love, which is probably the best motivator, or I would say the most positive motivator. Then there's hatred. People are motivated by love. They're also motivated by hate. And the third motivator is jealousy. Those are the three, I would say, probably primary motivators. You could call jealousy greed also, perhaps. You could call love greed. You could call any of them greed, possibly. So those are the three motivators. Somebody who does not approach it with wisdom is going to not be motivated by those things, even by those things at a certain point, as opposed to somebody who approaches it with wisdom will find motivation from those great motivators. Just to be clear also, we're not specifically talking about just wisdom. The way that he puts it is that wisdom can bring you to this, and also righteousness can. And as we mentioned since the beginning of the chapter, wisdom and righteousness are not necessarily interchangeable. A person can be wise, but not necessarily righteous. A person can be righteous, not necessarily wise. Those two things are not exclusive, or are not exclusive, and are not inclusive of each other. They just are two different things. So a person can achieve this through wisdom. A person can also achieve it through righteousness. And not only that, a person can also achieve it through being connected to wisdom and righteousness. The students of the wise and the students of the righteous also seem to have an ability to access this, which gives us a little more understanding about why we saw last week's verse. He says, he talks in the second person, which is a rare thing. I went to look back, and he has done a number of times throughout the book, but it's rare. Mostly he talks in the third person or the first person. Here he talks in the second person, or what we would call in Hebrew the nochach. He talks directly to the reader. He says, you should go and eat your bread with happiness and enjoy life, meaning you should you're reading the book, you're already connected to wisdom in a certain sense, wisdom and righteousness. So therefore, he's already giving you permission in a way to go ahead and do this and take this track yourself. Obviously, you're going to want to pick up the lessons along the way. So that brings us now to, again, chapter 9, verse number 9. Okay, so let me go into our share screen and we will could all see it together. This again is chapter 9, verse number 9. So again, the last two verses it's been what I would say is we've been experiencing a buildup. Okay, with verse number 7, he says, "Go eat your bread with happiness, drink your wine with good heart, because God has already desired your actions. You've achieved something that is desirable in just the fact that you've connected to wisdom." We mentioned also last week that this verse is used by the sages to refer to the evening following Yom Kippur. So after a day of introspection and thinking about this world and your place in it, that's a time when you can really enjoy life much better. Then he continues and it says, "At all times your clothing should be white," meaning should be fresh and clean, and the oil, you should not lack oil on your head, meaning to say that you should be have a fresh scent. So what we've seen here is this buildup, where in verse number 7 he's talking about taking something into your body. Eat bread, drink wine. Verse number 8 is talking about things about your body, or directly connected to your body. So you have the clothing, your clothing should be white, and the oil, the anointing oil, should be upon your head. Now in verse number 9, he's going to go outside of the body and still say that your aura of satisfaction is going to extend to the people around you. Okay, now this is a bit of a longer verse, and there's a number of questions that are going to stand out to us right away. So let's take a look at it. Re'ei chayim im isha asher ahavta. Look at life with a woman that you love. Okay, this is typical of the books of Tanakh, that it usually speaks to the masculine, but it's not limited to that. I just want to make that clear. So Re'ei chayim im isha asher ahavta. Look at life with the woman that you love. Kol yemei chayei hevlecha. For all the days of your life, that is Hevel. We've discussed Hevel a number of times, that Hevel is often translated as futility, but it really means steam, as in boiling water, or boiled water. So that meaning to say that it's usually fleeting, but with enough work, you're able to capture something out of it. You're able to distill it. So all the days of your Hevel life, Asher natan lecha tachat hashemesh, that are given to you under the sun, Kol yemei hevlecha, all the days of your Hevel, Ki hu chelkecha b'chayim, because that is your portion in life, Uva amalecha asher ata amel tachat hashemesh, and in your work that you work under the sun. All right, there's a lot of words there. Let's take it again from the top. We'll go read through it one more time. Re'ei chayim im isha asher havta. Look at life with the woman that you love. Kol yemei chayei hevlecha, for all the days of your Hevel life, Asher natan lecha tachat hashemesh, that are given to you under the sun, Kol yemei hevlecha, all the days of your Hevel, Ki hu chelkecha b'chayim, because that is your portion in this life, Uva amalecha asher ata amel, and in the work that you work, tachat hashemesh, under the sun. Okay, so there are a number of things that stand out to us right away. Okay, before we even get into what the verse means, we're faced with a number of questions. I would point out that we have two phrases in this verse that are repeated twice. Okay, number one is Yemei Chayei Hevlecha, right? All the days of your Hevel life is repeated one line later, not excluding the word Chayei. It just says Kol Yemei Hevlecha, all the days of your Hevel. So instead of saying all the days of your Hevel life, it says all the days of your Hevel. So that is something to discuss, to consider when we're going to approach this verse. Number two is the fact that it says also Asher natan lecha tachat hashemesh, that it is given the days that are given to you under the sun. And at the end of the word, it says v'amalcha asher ata amel tachat hashemesh, and all the work that you do under the sun. So we have the under the sun theme repeated twice, and we also have the Hevel theme repeated twice. Okay. Now these are both things that we've explained, that we've explored a number of times throughout the book. As I already said, Hevel being not just that life is futile, like people say, like people often translate Hevel, but rather that Hevel means that life can potentially be futile unless you have the tools with which to distill the steam. Okay, so again, that's always the hint behind Hevel. If he wants to say that life is worthless, he would use his other phrase, which is ut ruach, that it's spirit breaking. He doesn't say that. He says life is Hevel. He's very careful not to use the wrong term at the wrong time. And also, we've also noted, it's been one of our rules throughout the book, that the consistent insistence of King Solomon that we're talking about under the sun seems to be an indication that we're talking about this worldly things. We're not talking about some sort of existential, or maybe existential is the right word, but it's not an experience where we are going beyond this world. We're specifically talking about the experience here in this world. Okay, now that we have those two things clear, we're still stuck with the question why it's repeated twice and why there's actually a shift in the phrase in the second time of Yemei Chayei Havlecha. Okay, going back to the theme that we've been talking about. So we've been talking about this idea that somebody who experiences wisdom or righteousness will look at death with a very different experience, will use it as a motivator, and that motivation will actually allow them to enjoy life in a way that your average person cannot enjoy life. Okay, so again, that began with the person's self. They're able to enjoy their personal experiences differently. Their food is different, their drink is different. They actually appreciate it better because they understand the greater context of what life is. Then it's how they present themselves to other people in their clothing and in their scent, their personal fragrance. And now we have their actual relationship with other people, and we say that there is no, we say that the relationship that they have, the relationship of love, is something totally different. And again, that's been another, I should have mentioned, that's another theme of this chapter so far. What we found is this difference between the love of your average person, the love of the wise person. He stated in verse 1 of the chapter that your average person does not understand love, okay, cannot get it, okay? And he's been looking at love as a motivator. Love should be motivating a person to do better, to be better, to get more out of life, to enjoy life more. So here he's very clear about that. He says, look at life with the woman that you love. Again, woman for coming at them from the masculine point of view. It could be whatever, the one that you love, the spouse that you love, the people that you love. It doesn't even have. I would argue that he doesn't specifically mean the love of a husband and wife necessarily, but really the love of anybody who is important to you. You know, whether it's family or things in general that you love. Look at life with those that you love and use that and experience that emotion much greater, because that emotion is perhaps is for sure, I would say, the most important emotion or experience or emotional experience that a person will ever have. Okay, so what he says is look at life, meaning what defines life. He's saying look re'ei chayim, look at what life is. Life is with those that you love. The greatest life is when you experience and when you extend yourself and when you create a relationship with those that you love, a love relationship. And what I would say is that the following words bring that to light. They say, don't just look, right? See that this is life. And it turns Hevel, which is potentially very difficult for a person to experience a good life experience out of a Hevel experience. Instead, he's saying that see that the life that you love with the ones that you love, that creates a life out of Hevel. Okay? Meaning to say, why would he repeat this phrase once? Why would he repeat this phrase twice and then remove the chaye the second time? Because he's trying to give you a contrast. Life with those that you love, spending life with people that you love and care for, that turns what's over here referred to as just Yemei Havlecha, days of Hevel, days of steam, of difficult work. It turns that into Yemei Chayei Havlecha. They are life. It's a life of Hevel. It actually turns it into a life worth living, if we will. That's what we've been seeing in the past couple of verses, is that life is for the living. Okay, it's not about just getting to an end point and hoping that you won at the end of the day. It's not a computer game. It's what it is life is the experience of living as you're living. And so what he's saying over here is you want life, then spend it with other people. Reach out to other people, and then you will experience actual life. That is something that the wise person or the righteous person or those who have exposure to the wise and the righteous, that's something that they understand that other people do not understand. They see that motivation that's offered through love, and they see that as something that should inspire them. Kind of looking at what we said before, that there's three motivators that he talks about: love, hate, and jealousy. Perhaps he's saying over here, another idea that he's pointing out over here is really, if you want to be a wise or righteous person, will really kind of focus on that first one. Okay, obviously a person can be motivated by hatred also, or jealousy, but the healthiest, I would say, is the emotion of love. Okay, and that's what's going to turn again your hevel, that's over here in the second half of the verse, as just yemei hevlecha, that is going to be turned into chaye hevlecha, the days of the life of hevel, meaning it turns it into a life experience. We find this interesting contrast over here. At the end of chapter 7, he also brought up the woman, okay? Again, all coming from a man's perspective, because King Solomon was a man. But coming from he talked about the woman as being this version of wisdom that is unhelpful, is non-constructive. Okay, the woman there, when we were looking through the verses, we saw that the sages refer to this as the sages state that it refers to heresy. So there's a wisdom, not all wisdom is good wisdom, in other words, that there are things we have to be able to filter. The wise person is able to filter between good wisdom and wisdom that's taking them down a wrong path, that's taking them away from wholeness and from finding their purpose. What the sages at least refer to as heresy, thoughts or ideas that go against God's view of the world. So it's interesting that over there he referred to it as the woman also. And here we have this woman. And I said at the time, actually, when we learned that verse, that it's not that King Solomon's misogynistic and he says that there's no good women out there. It's not, quite the contrary. You see from this verse that King Solomon is pro the relationship between a man and a woman. I mean, with King Solomon himself, we know was a fan of that relationship. It's not, again, so it's not that he says that women are a problem. Again, besides the fact that if you get into the interpretation of the verse, that's clearly not what he's saying. But this verse shines light on what that verse is talking about. It's not saying that women are bad. It's saying that you better get the right one, so to speak. And again, it's not specifically to women or to men. It could go either way. Just he's coming from his perspective. So what we have over here is he's saying that look at life with a woman that you love, with a woman that you could find love, or with a spouse, or with a friend, or with a relationship that you can actually experience a love relationship that changes life into something, changes hevel, into something new. So now let's look back at the verse over here and get a better sense of what's going on. He says, look at life with the woman that you love, and it turns your hevel into a life. And it's the days that you're given under the sun, all of the days of hevel. So all the days of hevel are not simply left as days of hevel, they are turned into days of chaye hevel, the days of the life of hevel. Okay, again, turns into life. Now he points out, kihu chelkecha b'chayim, that this is a person's portion in this life. We've been discussing this also the past couple verses, is that the idea is not simply that they go through life and have experiences happen to them, but rather that they take ownership of the experiences that happen to them. And he keeps on harping on this point, chelkecha, your chelik, your portion. A wise person or a righteous person is able to grab life and make it their own, as opposed to just having experiences happen to them. Okay, and it gives a context to all the work that a person does in this world. So all the hard work. Amal, we've discussed this a number of times before. Amal is specifically hard work. Now, hard work doesn't mean a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Hard work is, as he's pointing out over here, hard work is a good thing. It's going to give a context to it. If a person labors with love, then the person's life will be will be a much greater experience. So the point is that he's reiterating this point over here, that we're talking about this world. It's not an experience of going beyond this world. I'm not talking about necessarily a spiritual experience. I'm talking about a very this worldly experience, but somebody who is wise or righteous, somebody who is connected to a greater sense of wisdom, is able to understand that the life that they live, the hard work that they put in, the labors that they go through, when they apply love to that, when they do it out of love and they do it because they experience love, that is something that's going to make the entire living in this world experience better. Okay, again, not to even discuss the next world. The sages over here, they go in their typical style. They do kind of talk about this experience of going beyond and talking about a more spiritual experience. And they say that the woman that you love is a reference, of course, if the sages are talking, it's going to be a reference to Torah. The study of Torah is going to be this a relationship, a love relationship like the one that a person would have, like a man would have with a woman. That itself is a very interesting concept and kind of a much bigger theory that goes beyond our discussion over here, but that the love of Torah study is similar in some ways to the love between a man and a woman. And there's a lot to say on that point. It's definitely way beyond the scope of our discussion over here. And I wouldn't necessarily say if I have enough information on that, but it's just an interesting idea. It's a give and a take, would be something to point out, I would say, right? Love requires that both partners in a love relationship are both giving and taking. Sometimes your job is to give, sometimes your job is to take. At the same time, that's also what the relationship is with the words of the Torah, is that we need to both be receptive to the words of the Torah, but also we want to be creative with the words of the Torah. We want to do something with them and utilize them to enhance our relationship with God or our relationship with other people. We want to be able to teach Torah, not just simply to collect it, I would say, but actually to do something with it, to turn it into something else. So that's to go into the sages' understanding of the verse over here, is that there's also the woman that you love is referring also, is a veiled reference to the study of Torah, which is something that a person can achieve a love style relationship with also. Okay, again, that's a pretty big topic. There's a lot to say over there, and it's way beyond the scope of our discussion over here. We try to deal with what the verses themselves, the words themselves seem to indicate. This verse is a very ripe verse for interpretation because it's got these repeated phrases. It's got this clear. It's both an obvious, a explicit meaning of, look, a person who enjoys life will enjoy it better with the people that they love, will experience love with other people. There's also an implicit understanding or a veiled understanding also to many things. Okay, so that is verse number 9. Okay, chapter 9, verse number 9. Look at life with the woman that you love, which is I personally love this verse. It's a great verse because it gives voice to this idea, this very human emotion that we have, that we need to experience and have a love relationship with those around us. Okay, and now that brings us to verse number 10. I'm going to say that verse number 10 over here is the end of these series of verses. So we've discussed this many times. The chapters that we have in the book are actually created by Christian monks. We did not make the chapters and verses. I mean, the verses we had, but we did not have the numbering system does not come from Judaism. We just happened to, once the monks came up with it, we borrowed it because it's actually not that bad of a system. But one thing I would point out is that an idea can end halfway through a chapter. It doesn't have to end at the beginning or end of a chapter. So I would say the verse number 10 over here is the end of the thought. It perhaps is, you could tack on verse number 11 and 12. I would say they're kind of a postscript to this idea. So we're going to end with chapter 10, with verse number 10 this week, and then I will go on a short break for Passover. But okay, so anyway, this verse number 10 is going to be our final verse for this week. All right. So finishing off this idea, again, this is King Solomon talking directly to the reader. And he says, Kol asher tinsaya dechala asot. Everything that you find in your hands to do, that you have the ability to do, bechochacha, in your powers, aseh, do it. Ke'en ma'aseh v'cheshbon, because there is no action, nor calculation, v'da'at, nor wisdom, how would I translate it? Da'at, I would translate as knowledge, and chachma as wisdom. Bish'ol, these things do not exist in the grave. Asher ata holech shama, that you are headed towards. Okay? Again, the book of Ecclesiastes can be a very dark, it can be interpreted as a dark book. Our goal is to try to find the uplifting or empowering ideas in it. So he's not saying, before we get into interpretation, let's read it one more time. We always read it twice. Kol asher timsaya dechala asot, anything that you have, that you find in your hands to do, that is within your power, aseh, you should do. Ki ein ma'aseh, because there is no action, v'cheshbon, nor calculation, v'da'at, nor knowledge, v'chachma, nor wisdom, bish'ol, in the grave, asher ata holech shama, that you are headed towards, right? That you are going there, literally. Okay, so I don't believe what he's trying to do is say, look, that's it. There's an end point, and that's the end of it. No, what he's saying is that knowledge, a wise person will take that knowledge and use that to motivate themselves. That our time here is limited. We hope for the most that we can possibly get, but our time here is limited, and that should not tear us down or make us not capable, but rather it should show us our capabilities. It should allow us, it should push us, prompt us to be more active and proactive in our service, or in the things that we want to do. So this is a very almost pushy verse. King Solomon's telling you this is the end of it, the end of his talking directly to the reader, and he says, so get the point, right? A person should look at the limited time that they have in this world as a motivator, and they should find love, and they should find enjoyment and pleasure, and they should find action. And this is what he's saying over here. And they should take all those tools that they have in their hands, right? The bread that they've eaten, the wine that they drink, and the clothing that they're wearing, and the oil on their head, and the wife that they're with, or the spouse that they're with, or the love connections that they've made. They should take all those things in their hand, all this bounty that you have in your hands, and do whatever you can built with the abilities that you have. I think that's a very important point over here that he's saying. He specifically points out, bechochacha, that is within your power to do. Okay? I was just talking to my wife about this the other day. We were talking about there's kind of this sense in the world now that everyone should be able to do everything. That's kind of a sense that you get from popular culture nowadays, that anyone could do anything. If you set your mind to it, you could do it. And that's a message I definitely got as a kid. But I don't know if that's 100% true. Everybody has abilities that they have, and they should utilize those abilities. They shouldn't try to utilize abilities that they do not have necessarily. They could hone skills that they have. They could find abilities that they didn't realize that they have, perhaps. But I wouldn't necessarily agree with the idea that you could do whatever you want to do. You can do whatever you are capable of doing. That makes sense. My wife does dance sometimes. She was trained as a dancer, so she sometimes sees dance things like on YouTube or something like that, and she looks at the dancers and says that this person, I don't know if they have the skills it takes to dance. Now that doesn't mean they can't enjoy it and they can't do it and have fun doing it and everything like that, but maybe they shouldn't be doing it on YouTube. Again, that's probably a point that we could quibble about. Maybe there's different opinions here, but I think it's important that a person does work. Perhaps, let me put it this way instead. Perhaps before a person tries to find the skills and abilities that they don't naturally have, and before trying to create something that's not natural to them, to instead first do an inspection of their abilities and find the things that they do have, because those are things that are obvious to the person and should guide them in their actions. The skills that we do have, those are things that we can use and should use to our advantage. Again, maybe perhaps before we go and seek out other skills. It's very hard not to get stuck in the jealousy rut where we see things that other people have and we think we want those things, but in reality, they may not match who we are as a person. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in the fact that he points out this idea, that it's specifically, look at all the things that you have in your hands. Look at all the abilities, all the great gifts, the bounty that we have in our hands, but then do things with them that are within your power to do. Okay, I'm always inspired by it's a pet peeve of mine, I guess, that Martin Luther King Jr. was an amazing speaker, and unfortunately, I feel it's unfortunate that the only speech that people could quote from him is his "I Have a Dream" speech, because it's a great speech and it's a world-changing speech, I would say, but I wouldn't even say it's his greatest speech. He has a speech that he did on a number of occasions about the street sweeper, and he talked about how if your lot in life is to be a street sweeper, then be the greatest street sweeper you could possibly be. Take the situation that life has put you into and do the greatest thing you could do with it. And it's not about becoming something you're not. It's rather becoming the best version of the person that you are. So again, interestingly, that King Solomon's putting this again very much in the, again, as I said in Hebrew, we refer to it as the nochach. He's in the second person. He's talking directly to you, the reader, you, the listener. He's saying, you can do these things. You can go ahead and you can take wisdom and the knowledge that your time is limited, and you can turn that into a motivator and use that as an opportunity to push yourself forward. And he's saying final step is have all those abilities and all those gifts and everything like that, and find your specific abilities and do something with them. And he's saying don't sit around and wait for it. There's something to some people have an ability to just get up and do something. It's something I know in myself that I struggle with. I'll have an idea, but I struggle to get something out into actual, to make something actual with it, to make something tangible with it. So I'll have ideas floating in my head, and I don't necessarily always have the ability to turn it into something. And so that's again where a calculation of bechochacha will come in. What are my abilities? What are my actual strengths? And what I can do? It's a call to action over here for a person to be introspective. Introspective, to look at the actions at the things that they have and really take a good inventory of the abilities that the person has and accounting of the things that the person has. Okay, and he says that the whole point is because there is an end point. Okay, so it's very important that a person takes the time that they have and does the things that they want to do and not wait around, because there are 4 things that we only experience in life. We don't experience them after life. We only experience them in life. Okay, and that again is action, calculation, knowledge, and wisdom. That's an interesting thing because we kind of have this sense that people go upstairs and they're suddenly imbued with this wisdom of the world, which there's probably something to that too. I'm not going to claim that I have any knowledge of what happens upstairs beyond what the sages tell us. Right? But we are told over here in this verse that the thing that we call wisdom or the thing that we call knowledge, that happens down here, right? There's something different upstairs, something different on the other side. And that's really kind of, I would argue that's not necessarily what we're here to figure out. It's kind of goes back to that idea that we read from Rabbi Soloveitchik a couple weeks ago, about how life is about living right here, right now, in the world that we live in. So what we can do in this world is we can do action. We can make calculations. We can access knowledge and wisdom. Those are things that we can't do elsewhere. There's a great story. One of my favorite stories, actually. I don't know, not necessarily one of my favorite stories. That was an over exaggeration. But a story that I think is an important story is that the Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna, who was a great Talmudist and everything. He was a halachist and everything. He was a big rabbi. About 210 years ago, 230 years ago, he passed away. So he when he was dying, when he was passing away, when he was actually dying, he died on the third day of Sukkot. So it says that as he was lying on his deathbed, he reached into his clothing and he pulled out the strings of his tzitzit, and he said, "Look at this. For just a couple pennies, or kopecks, I guess, for just a couple kopecks, a person can do something, can do action in this world, and receive reward for it, and come closer to God through that, and can live, can experience something, and that's something that I'm not going to have on the other side. A person cannot wear tzitzit on the other side. There's no tzitzit there. Tzitzit are this world thing. Action, mitzvot, the commandments, connecting to Hashem through our actions. That's something that happens here. That's something that the sages are very clear about throughout their words in general, is that this world is the time for doing the action. We reap the benefits in the next world, but the actual action only happens over here. So that idea, ki ein ma'aseh bishol, just bishol, there is no action in the grave. In fact, we have a custom in Judaism that we do not, when we approach the graveyard, if we go to visit graves, we actually hide any mitzvot. The most obvious one perhaps being tzitzit. If a man is wearing tzitzit on the outside of their clothing, they should tuck it into their clothing so that it's not making fun of those who have passed. We don't want to make fun of them because that they can't do mitzvot anymore. So that's something that it's kind of a sensitivity that we try to have, which, that itself is kind of an interesting idea. But put that to the side. Action is here for this world, is not for the next world. Calculation is a very this worldly thing, right? Perhaps there will be a time when we do cross over into the other side, that we will be able to get a sense of why things happen, or we'll finally be able to realize and to understand all the ins and outs of why why different things occur in this world. But we here, when we're living, we're constantly calculating, whether it's very mundane calculations of how am I going to make rent this month, or calculations of how, if I do this, how will it affect things over here? If I talk this way, if I say these words, how will it affect the people around me? That's a very this worldly thing. And again, knowledge and wisdom also, those are things that are accessed here in this world. So kind of putting the period on this idea, he's saying, I've said a lot of nice words, perhaps. I've given you a good sense of what does a wise or righteous person do. Well, they get to enjoy life much better. They create love relationships with people that with other people. But perhaps the most important thing is do things, be proactive, take stock of your abilities, and turn that into action. Obviously that comes with balance and all those sorts of things. We have to be balanced in how we do that. But it's very important that a person takes full accounting of it. This idea that we talked about of not going in directions, not trying to do things that you don't have power to do, I would say that's kind of the subject of the following two verses. So we'll get into that after Passover. We're going to take a short break now.